Shut up and sit down.
Hello, I'm Arkatsuke, and I've decided to try something different. Today I will be doing a response video to the internet's favorite non-binary sophist, Riley Dennis. Now, if you're watching this channel, chances are you've already heard of the Riley person. But if you haven't, all you really need to know is that this person is the embodiment of basically everything people hate about so-called social justice. A male feminist who calls himself transsexual, but seems rather blasé about transitioning since he seems to still have a penis, dates a woman, and then calls himself a transsexual lesbian. If you suffer from migraines, medicate yourself now or stop watching.
Have you ever been in an argument with someone and they just keep repeating the same annoying questions over and over again? So you keep answering them thinking that eventually you'll be able to convince this person, but then they just keep asking more obtuse and ridiculous questions?
Yes, I'm fairly certain that's a part of almost any normal conversation at some point. I am curious, however, how you will define obtuse or ridiculous, since you and SJWs have a history of not adhering to actual dictionary definitions and reinventing them to suit your arguments. Do you perhaps mean people who don't accept your anti-science views about gender as a social construct? Or how you use the word violence to refer to people who misgender trans persons? I suspect you do, which makes me suspicious about your arguments.
Hours and gotten literally nowhere. Well, I'm sorry to say it, but you just got sea lion. Sea lioning as a term comes from this 2014 webcomic by David Malky as a part of his Wondermark webcomic.
As a pretty big comic book fan, I'm not opposed to using good comic books to illustrate a point or argument, but I'm skeptical of basing one entirely on it. It would depend on the level of cultural significance, intellectual and artistic quality that the work added to society.
Go through it together, and if you don't want to hear me doing a really bad impression of a sea lion, I suggest you stop watching this video now, okay?
Why do people do things that they themselves feel the need to apologize for? I know we all do it sometimes, hopefully with irony. But if you're trying to make a serious point, it's probably better to just not do it.
Here we go. I don't mind most marine animals, but sea lions, I could do without sea lions. Don't say that out loud. Pardon me. I couldn't help but overhear. Now you've done it, I would like to have a civil conversation about your statement. Would you mind showing me evidence of any negative thing any sea lion has ever done to you? Go away. There's no need to raise your voice. I'm right here. I'm just curious if you have any sources to back up your opinion. You're in my house. You made a statement in public for all to hear. Are you unable to defend statements you make, or simply unwilling to have a reasoned discussion? Told you, dude. Sea lions. I have been unfailingly polite, and you two have been nothing but rude. I am trying to eat breakfast. Very well, we shall resume in an hour. I'm so sorry for that terrible voice acting, but
You should, especially considering that you yourself made a video about not mocking or imitating accents and how doing so could be a source of harm or even cultural appropriation. Just no.
anyway, the point of the comic strip is that sea lioning is when someone repeatedly asks you questions in bad faith and demands that you drop everything and devote all your time and energy to them.
That's an interesting way to interpret that comic. For starters, it begins with a public statement of prejudice. The sea lion then asks why these people have done this. He does not accuse them about sea lionophobia, or even ask that they apologize. Where is the bad faith exactly? Imagine the comic had replaced the intentionally ridiculous talking marine mammal with a black person, or God forbid, a trans person. Side note about this comic, it's actually a relic of the Gamergate war. Guess which side Malky was on? One that attempted to legitimize the refusal of corrupt game journalists involved in the scandal to engage with the gamers that they were so against. Interesting, it rears its head again.
I remember when I first heard about this term, I was just like, wow, that describes so much of my experience online. There were so many times where I got dragged into completely pointless debates online that dragged on for hours or days and literally got us nowhere.
Another interesting thing for you to say, since when you type in Riley Dennis debate on YouTube, you literally get no results. You, Riley, also have a history of blocking all dissenting views on your social media pages and have completely arbitrary standards about what subjects are even debatable.
The reason for that is that a sea lion isn't actually trying to hear out your side. They just want to frame their argument as polite and reasoned questions.
How on earth do you know that? So far, your only evidence is that they appear polite and reasonable. And this is somehow disingenuous. Again, if you aren't even talking to them, how do you know what their intentions are? Are you basing your actions on your own bias of who is asking the questions? Or are you simply unwilling to entertain the possibility that your beliefs might be wrong?
So they pester you over and over and over again until you set them up to make their argument. And they repeatedly ask you questions that they don't really care about the answer to. They just want to drag you back into the argument with them. Even if you do answer their questions, they will avoid your answers or deflect from them and ask you more questions.
I wonder if when you say deflect, you mean that they aren't convinced by your paper-thin arguments. Difficult to say, since there is little to no evidence of you actually engaging in a debate of any kind without resorting to blocking or name-calling.
You'll end up going in circles, explaining yourself endlessly like you're talking to a really annoying brick wall. And that's kind of the point. Sea lioning is a form of trolling. It's not meant to actually get answers or change minds. It's meant to waste your time and wear you down. Their hope is that eventually, if they keep bothering you over and over and over again, you'll eventually concede and just say, oh, okay, I guess you're right since you're so persistent and I'm tired of arguing.
Said no one, ever, anywhere. If anything, the strategy of victory through attrition reminds me of your typical social justice activist playbook. Case in point, Antifa protesting college campus speakers over and over again until colleges decide not to book them because it's too expensive, too big a headache, or frankly unsafe because of looming threats.
Frame it as you giving up and them winning. It's a lot like in 3rd grade when bullies are like, you won't fight me because you're a chicken.
Or like when you tell someone they're wrong and they say, you have cooties and I'm not talking to you.
It's the same basic technique. You appeal to the person's desire to prove their point and be right, and hopefully you can drag them into a debate where you have no intention of listening to them, and you're just hoping that you have more stamina than them. If you haven't been sea lioned before, I'm sure you can see how annoying this would be. And if you have been sea lioned before, hopefully it feels good to be able to have a word to apply to it. Now, there are people who will argue against this, obviously. They'll say that calling something sea lioning is just an excuse to not provide evidence for something, or an excuse to get out of a debate. But the fact of the matter is, you don't owe everyone on the internet all the evidence in the world every time you talk about something online.
Oh yes, the classic, it's not my job to educate you defense. Essentially saying that you don't understand what I'm saying, or you're willfully ignorant/privileged. Except people do understand you, they just disagree with your conclusions. Telling them that they aren't educated is just a really elitist way of saying, I'm not going to talk about it.
Everyone has to bring up a backlog of thousands of articles on racism every time they want to talk about racism. We're never gonna get anywhere. Sometimes you gotta do your own research.
True, but if you presume to be an activist educator and have a large channel about said activism, writing articles for such esteemed publications as Everyday Feminism, you presumably at least have to entertain the idea that if you are advancing a point of view, you might need to, at least occasionally, back it up. Only the Pope claims to be infallible, and while you both wear dresses, you do not have the right to expect people to blindly embrace your dogmas. Also, I doubt anyone could withstand the cerebral hemorrhage that would doubtlessly follow a multi-hour debate with you, Riley.
research. A lot of questions that sea lions ask are really easy to just Google. And besides, nobody owes you their time on the internet. No stranger is required to present you, random internet person, with evidence, nor are they required to debate with you for literal hours.
How about one? Literally anyone who doesn't agree with you. Just one. Even a little one.
This is especially true when someone has a larger audience, because while one person asking for evidence might not be much of a problem, hundreds of people all asking for evidence and for you to debate them, that's just not possible.
So only bad faith trolls disagree with you. It must be wonderful to live in a world where you not only know you are always right, but that anyone who questions you is duplicitous and wrong.
You'd spend literally all of your time researching evidence for these trolls and wasting your time arguing with them when they were never asking in good faith anyway. And
Again, what is the criteria for determining all of this? And how could you ever know this if you don't ever engage in debate? And no, talking to other SJWs in a safe space does not count as debate. That requires 2 or more viewpoints. Otherwise, it's just mutual affirmation.
that's another part of this. This all hinges on the questions being asked in bad faith. If you have a genuine question and you're asking it in good faith, meaning you're willing to listen and you actually care about the answer, and you've already done some basic internet research and couldn't find the answer, then by all means, ask it. That doesn't make you a sea lion. You're allowed to have questions. But also, remember that you're not entitled to anyone's time.
I guess only people who agree with you are entitled to your time.
If they don't respond to you, don't take it as a personal insult. They probably just don't have time. Or maybe they've been swarmed with so many sea lions, it can
Oh my god, so many humble brags.
be hard to weed out the non-sea lions. This isn't about avoiding debate or avoiding evidence. Debates with people in good faith can be useful, but debates with people who are unwilling to listen, like sea lions, are pointless.
Especially if you seem to define listening as agreeing with you.
And obviously, claims need evidence, but you're not required to find and hand-deliver that evidence to every single individual who requests it.
Someone wanting to debate you because they disagree with you isn't them asking you to hand-deliver anything. Riley, you seem to think that if people ask questions, that means they don't have any opinions or evidence of their own. What's more likely is people trying to understand the mental gymnastics that you employ to justify the many incoherent statements that emerge from your channel.
Like when you mention something that depends on the Earth being round, you're not required to present all of the scientific evidence for a round Earth. Imagine how exhausting that would be every time you mention something that involves the Earth being round. People
Ever notice SJWs often talk about how exhausted they are, emotional labor, and such? I think it comes from taxing the bullshit buffer in their brains.
can do their own research for that. No one is entitled to your time or unpaid labor, even if sea lions would have you believe otherwise. So feel free to ignore or mute or block the sea lions in your life. You don't have to waste your time with them. And now you at least have a word for them.
If you took a shot every time Riley says something cringy, contradictory, or just plain stupid, you would probably liquefy your liver in minutes. I might actually try that with some of my friends. At the end of the day, Riley's entire argument hinges on an invented verb from a shitty webcomic to justify intellectual cowardice. At a certain point, people know when they are deceiving themselves, and it gets depressing. So SJWs, being the masters of deception and manipulation, invented a new verb, sea lioning, to describe a necessary conceit of their movement. Our ideas and our followers are stupid and easily debunked, so we need a way to make them feel good about not questioning themselves and not giving in to outside scrutiny. Hence, sea lions. If you convince yourself through contrived jargon that anyone who questions your sacred beliefs does so in bad faith, or that their entire purpose for doing so is just to distract and confuse you, then of course you wouldn't feel even a little bit bad about ignoring them. In fact, you might feel a sense of pride and accomplishment for doing so. Jordan Peterson has talked at great and eloquent length about how postmodernists don't believe in debate because they reject logic in favor of power structures and lived experiences. And this latest example is nothing more than window dressing on the same rotting corpse of an idea. Riley Dennis, you're not even a sea lion, which at least wants to discuss ideas. You don't engage in debate because you seem to believe those ideas are sacrosanct. You are a deluded acolyte of sophistry and ignorance, believing you have access to special knowledge. You are sad and uninteresting. The only reason people pay attention to you is because of the outlandish things you purport to believe, which attract two kinds of people: a small coven of broken gender anarchists, and a huge number of people with intact nervous systems that can't decide whether to laugh at you or pity you. Well, as much fun as this has been, it must thankfully end. In the same way that we now chuckle about how ridiculous phrenology and hoop skirts were, I sincerely hope that we as a society outgrow this current gender mania and get back to just being people without this perverse litany of pronouns and Foucault-inspired sociobabble. This has been Are Cats Gay? Like, subscribe, laugh, love it, hate it. You already watched it. You can't unwatch it. Thank you for watching.